My name's Mason. I'm 29. And about 6 weeks ago, I was sleeping on a borrowed air mattress in a buddy's living room, wondering if this was really it for me. Not exactly the Pinterest vision of adulthood I had in mind. 2 years earlier, I was a rising dev in a mid-tier software company. Good pay, cozy apartment, even a weekly trivia night with coworkers who didn't make me want to fake food poisoning. But then the layoffs came because, of course, they did. Corporate restructuring, they said. I was non-essential. Cool, thanks. Fast forward through 18 months of job hunting, gig work, and burning through my savings like kindling in a bonfire, and I ended up back at my parents' place. Not because I wanted to, but because I didn't have a single better option. I told myself it'd be temporary. They didn't. From the outside, it didn't seem that bad. Dad, Ron, was a quiet guy. Didn't talk much unless something was broken or a game was on. Mom Jean, though. Oh, she made sure the air around me was thick enough to cut with a spoon. "This isn't a resort," she'd mutter loud enough for the neighbors and their dog to hear. "You left a spoon in the sink again. Do you think that's okay?" She had a way of making every meal feel like an invoice. I chalked it up to stress at first, but then came the comparisons. Your cousin Ali just bought her second property at 26. You know, when we were your age, we had a toddler and a mortgage. Every conversation felt like a job interview I hadn't studied for. Every glance like a silent performance review. And then there was Theo, my younger brother, 4 years younger, finance bro, lives in a modern glass, high-rise downtown and drinks $12 cold brews because they're smoother. He only showed up on holidays or when mom guilt tripped him with photos of her sad garden gnome collection. But when he did arrive, it was like royalty had descended. Suddenly the house smelled like cinnamon candles, and mom's voice took on this sugary pitch. "There's my boy. Look at those muscles. Have you been working out?" Meanwhile, I'm in the corner fixing their Wi-Fi for the 4th time this week. The final straw came on a random Thursday dinner. I was setting the table cracked plates, random forks, and Theo strolled in mid-convo about gas prices. "Must be nice not having to commute," he said, not even looking at me. Then mom handed him a drink like he just came back from war, turned to me and asked, "Have you applied to any real jobs lately?" My stomach dropped. I told her again that I had 2 interviews lined up that week. She didn't flinch. Theo leaned in. At some point, it's not bad luck anymore. It's bad choices. No eye contact. Just that condescending smirk people wear when they think they're being helpful. I didn't yell. I didn't throw a fit. I just took my plate, walked back into the kitchen, and ate standing over the counter. Like I was 12 again, grounded for something I didn't do. I could hear them laughing in the other room, catching words like "can't rely on charm forever," and "it's just embarrassing now." The next morning, I was coding a freelance website for a dog treat company when mom barged into the den. No knock, obviously. "You need to start paying rent," she said flatly. I nodded. "I will. Once this client pays, should be next week, not next week." Now, I stared at her. "I don't even have the money." "You don't have money because you've chosen not to grow up," she snapped. "This has gone on long enough. You're dead weight." That phrase stung more than I expected. Dead weight. And just like that, she left, only to return moments later dragging a dusty duffel bag from the hallway closet. She dropped it at my feet. "You can crash somewhere else. If you don't like it, figure it out." I didn't argue, didn't cry. I packed up my laptop, charger, and toothbrush and walked out without a word. The word Leech echoed in my ears. But now it was joined by dead weight. Lucas was the first one to say yes. No questions asked, just tossed me a pillow and said, "Microwave's busted, couch is yours." It wasn't glamorous, but it was safe. For a week, I freelanced like my rent depended on it because, well, it kinda did. I slept weird hours, took gigs from people who paid in coffee gift cards, and lived off instant noodles and the occasional Mercy burrito. Then I stayed a few days with an ex, Isla, who I hadn't spoken to in months. She was kinder than she needed to be. Said I could crash while I got my bearings. She even let me borrow her old desk chair. I didn't say it, but I almost cried when she did that. I was still broke, still stressed, still trying to convince myself I had a future, but something shifted. When you have no safety net, there's only forward. I stopped second-guessing every pitch I sent. I reached out to a muralist I met at a local coffee fair and helped her set up an online store for her prints, then a bakery, then a yoga studio. One night, half delirious on deadline adrenaline, I got a LinkedIn DM from a recruiter, said she'd found my portfolio. Wanted to know if I'd be open to a remote front-end dev role at a startup. I reread the message 6 times before replying. Within a week, I was interviewing. 2 weeks after that, I had the job. Benefits, remote, no dress code. It wasn't Google money, but it was real, grown-up salary. I finally exhaled. First paycheck? I used part of it to pay back Lucas and Isla for the takeout and kindness. Second paycheck? I signed a lease for a studio apartment the size of a generous closet, but it had a window. And that window overlooked the corner of a bookstore cafe that always smelled like hope and burnt espresso. It was mine, all mine. No one could throw me out. No one could call me a burden. I moved in on a rainy Tuesday and cried into a pizza box on the floor. Not because I was sad, but because, for the first time in a long time, I felt like a real person. 3 weeks later, my phone buzzed while I was debugging a payment form. My dad, Ron. I hadn't heard from him since I left. Not a call, not a text. I let it go to voicemail. Then he called again. Then came the text, "Why is our bank account locked?" I blinked. What? And then like a match to dry paper, I remembered. Back when I was still stuck in that house, Dad had asked me to handle the online stuff. He hated banks, hated tech, but he didn't trust Mom to do it either. So I set up their mobile access, synced it to their tax software, even added myself as a secondary admin in case something broke. We used my number for 2-factor authentication. My email for backups. It wasn't shady, it was practical. They asked, I helped. But now they were locked out, and I knew why. Multiple failed login attempts. They probably forgot the password, probably tried to reset it and hit too many wrong answers. Now that they needed the backup. Me. I didn't reply. I just stared at the screen. Then I typed 3 words. Ask the deadweight. No emojis, no explanation, just that. An hour later, chaos. My phone blew up. 3 missed calls from Mom. Then a barrage of texts. Mason, this isn't funny. Call your father back. We can't pay our bills. Are you seriously doing this to us after everything? After everything. That part made me laugh. For the first time in years, I had leverage. And I wasn't about to waste it. I wasn't looking for revenge, but I wanted recognition, accountability. I wanted them to admit what they did to see me as more than their fallback, it guy, an emotional punching bag. That evening, I picked up when Dad called again. His voice was strained. Mason, we need help. The bank said, you're the secondary contact. Can you just reset it? I kept my tone calm. It locked automatically after too many attempts. Fine. Can you just unlock it? He paused. Please. That word hit strange. Not angry. Not demanding. Just awkward. Like he hadn't said it in years. I let the silence hang for a second. Then I'll help. But we're gonna talk first. He hesitated. About what? I didn't flinch. About why your wife called me dead weight and threw my stuff out. About how you stood there and let her. Silence. I wasn't yelling. I didn't need to. The truth was loud enough. I did everything I could to help in that house. Fixed things. Cooked. Paid for my own food. Took freelance gigs so I wouldn't be a burden. And for that, I got compared to Theo every time I blinked. I got treated like I was 12. And when I couldn't pay rent immediately, you both acted like I was some parasite. His voice dropped. We didn't see it that way, I know. That's the problem. He didn't argue. Just let out a long, tired sigh. We do need your help. I didn't gloat. I didn't mock. I just offered terms. I'll unlock everything. But I want a real apology from both of you. In person. No fake smiles. No way we're just stressed. I want acknowledgement. And after that, no contact for 6 months. No tech favors. No surprise visits. And I'm removing myself from your accounts permanently. He was quiet. Then, she's not gonna like that. I exhaled. I didn't like getting kicked out of my childhood home. You'll manage. He said he'd talk to her. The call ended. My hands were shaking. Not with fear, with clarity. I wasn't being cruel. I was drawing a line. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just reacting. I was choosing. 2 days passed. Then I got an email from Mom. Short, formal, cold. I realize I said things I shouldn't have. Hope you're doing well. No signature. No warmth. But it was something. I unlocked the account, removed myself from it, then blocked their numbers for a week, just to breathe, just to exist. And that's when everything started to unravel. Not for me, for them. I wasn't planning to find out what happened next, but I didn't have to dig. My cousin Laura posted a boomerang on her Instagram story from Sunday brunch at Grandma's. Everyone in frame looked like they'd just come back from a funeral. My mom sat stiff at the end of the table, wine glass untouched, lips pursed like someone handed her a lemon and said smile. My dad sat next to her, rubbing his temples like they were trying to hold in the last brain cell that hadn't short-circuited. Theo sat across from them, frowning at something on his phone. The caption? When the group project loses, the only one who knew what they were doing. Hashtag family drama, hashtag oops. I messaged her immediately. What happened? She replied in less than a minute. Dude, your mom has been trying to log into the bank for a week. She locked it again. Theo tried to fix it and made it worse. Now she's blaming you. Said you sabotaged it on purpose. I stared at my screen. Honestly, not surprised. Tired, yes. Annoyed, always. But shocked? Not even close. Because that's the pattern, right? I am invisible when things work. I'm the villain when they don't. And this time, I wasn't even in the building. A few days later, Laura messaged again, this time with a voice memo. You are not going to believe this, she started. So apparently after you removed yourself from the tax software, your dad realized he didn't save the password to the new system you set up last year. When he called support, they asked him to verify info from the last return which you submitted, using your email and your password, which no one has anymore. I could practically hear her trying not to laugh. But wait, it gets better. Theo thought he could fix it by creating a new profile, using your dad's social. The system flagged it as suspicious activity. Locked the account. All of it. Taxes, statements, HSA, retirement tools, everything. I sat there, phone in my hand, just absorbing the sheer poetic absurdity of it. The golden child, the proud finance guy, the one who used to toss me passive-aggressive career advice over holiday dinners, accidentally flagged their accounts as identity theft. I didn't even have to do anything. They sank the ship themselves. Karma served medium rare, but of course I was still the villain. According to Laura, my mom told Grandma that she suspected I had hacked the system out of spite, that I was punishing them for kicking me out. As if I had time to plot digital revenge in between work, sleep, and trying to find clean socks. I didn't even have the energy to be angry, just disappointed. That no matter how clear my boundaries were, they still painted me as the threat. Still couldn't admit they were in this mess because they refused to listen, that I didn't need revenge. They were doing it to themselves. And then it got worse. Apparently, when they lost access to their tax return file, my dad decided to handle it manually, which sounded like a sitcom punchline even before Laura explained. He input their mortgage interest as earned income, triggered an automatic audit. And when the IRS contacted them for clarification, they panicked and tried to log into the customer support portal I'd set up with two-factor tied to my number. Surprise denied. The cherry on top? The recovery email had been deleted when I shut down the Google Drive folder labeled Banking for Mom and Dad. No backup, no way in. They had to hire an actual accountant, one that charged $175 an hour and didn't answer panicked voicemails at 10:30 p.m. They finally saw the cost of replacing free labor, of mistaking support for weakness, of treating their tech-savvy son like dead weight until the floor collapsed underneath them. And the best part? I still hadn't heard a word from them. No calls, no emails, no apologies, just silence. Like they hoped if they ignored the fire long enough, it would go out on its own. But then someone knocked on my apartment door. Not a text, not a call, an actual knock. My building had this specific kind of echo in the hallway, the kind that warned you someone was standing there hesitating. I opened the door slowly, and there they were, my parents, Jean and Ron. My mom clutching her purse like it was a shield, my dad looking like he hadn't slept in days. Neither of them spoke. I raised an eyebrow. If you're here to yell, save it. They stepped inside, looked around like they were stepping into foreign territory. Which, To be fair, it kind of was. My apartment didn't have much secondhand shelves, a desk, a couch that was also a bed, but it was mine. My dad finally spoke. "We need your help." Just 3 weeks ago, they told me to go leech off someone else. Now they stood in the space I built without them, asking for rescue. My mom cleared her throat. We lost access to our savings account. The tax filing triggered something. There are late fees, penalties. We're struggling. I nodded slowly. That sounds rough. You must feel stuck. Her eyes darted up, surprised at my calm. No bite, no smugness, just observation. "I'm sorry," she said. Not passive-aggressively, not with qualifiers, just, "I'm sorry." My dad added, "We didn't realize how much you were doing. We thought we were being generous letting you stay. But you were holding the whole thing together." I didn't respond right away. I let it sit. Then I told them everything. How it felt to be compared to Theo constantly. How their version of love always felt like performance reviews. How I tried again and again to contribute, to be seen. And how getting kicked out wasn't rock bottom, it was revelation. My mom looked like she wanted to cry. Maybe for the first time she actually listened. They asked me to come back, to help get everything running again. Said they'd pay. Said it'd be different. I shook my head. "I'll write out instructions. I'll walk you through it. But I'm not moving back. I have peace now. I'm not giving that up." We spent 2 hours resetting accounts, calling tech support, verifying documents. I didn't yell, didn't sigh, just walked them through it like a very patient stranger. When we were done, I closed my laptop and said, "I'll send you a document outlining everything. But after that, I'm done. No more admin access, no more emergency fixes. You're grown. You'll figure it out." My dad nodded slowly. My mom looked like she wanted to say something else but didn't. They left. And I sat on my tiny couch, staring at the door after it closed, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Control and freedom. That should have been the end. But it wasn't. Not even close. Because families like mine, they don't learn the first time. They don't like the quiet until it starts echoing what came next. That's where things got truly unhinged. It started with a ping, then 3, then 5. Not from my parents, no. They'd gone radio silent since the apartment walkthrough, but from people around them. My Aunt Mel messaged me on Facebook. "Hey, sweetie, your mom mentioned you've been distant lately. Everything okay?" Distant. That's what she called me, blocking them after being kicked out like trash. I didn't reply. Then my cousin Dan sent me a screenshot from the family group chat. It was my mom, spiraling. "I don't know what happened to Mason. He's cold now. Just shut us out. All I did was ask for help." All she did. As if throwing my things into a duffel bag and calling me dead weight was a gentle nudge. Then came Theo. Of course it did. He sent me an email like he was writing a TED Talk. "Hey man, I know things have been tense, but maybe it's time to let go of the anger. Mom and Dad aren't perfect, but they're still our parents. We've all made mistakes. You had a rough patch. We all do. Let's not make it bigger than it needs to be. Let's grab coffee soon." I deleted it without answering. Because Theo never lifted a finger when things were bad, never showed up, never offered help, never even acknowledged how hard I was trying. But now, when I drew a line, suddenly I was the problem. What none of them understood was this wasn't about one fight. It wasn't about getting kicked out or who reset a password. This was years in the making. Years of being the convenient son, the one who could fix the router and file taxes and research new insurance plans, but never the one who got a birthday dinner or a thank you card. It was birthday texts that said, "Hope this year's better," while Theo got custom cufflinks and steak dinners. It was listening to my mom brag about Theo's bonus, while ignoring the fact that I built her entire Etsy store from scratch. And now that I step back, now that I chose not to be useful, their lives didn't run. Not because I sabotaged anything, but because I was the glue, and they never noticed until it stopped sticking. But I wasn't angry. I was done. That's when it happened. An announcement from work. My company was expanding its remote team and opening a small satellite office in Toronto. Relocation bonuses offered. Flexible contracts. I didn't hesitate. Within 2 weeks, I'd filed the paperwork, signed a new lease, and booked a one-way flight. I was leaving, a new city, a clean slate, 0 surprise visitors. I found a small one-bedroom tucked above a ramen bar. It had brick walls, creaky floors, and a corner window that caught the sunset. It was perfect, quiet, unbothered, free. I packed what I needed and left the rest. I didn't even tell them I was going until the last night. Just sent a final email. Subject line, update. Hi, Mom and Dad. I've accepted a job relocation to Toronto and will no longer be available for tech support, account access, or household help. I've removed myself from everything and ensured you have full control moving forward. I hope this new chapter gives us all some peace. Take care, Mason. No reply. Not even a thumbs up. A year ago that would have gutted me. Now, I felt relief. I landed in Toronto on a gray Tuesday morning. The kind of day that smells like wet pavement and blank pages. I unpacked, bought a potted plant, joined a local tech meetup, and started volunteering at a digital literacy nonprofit helping seniors learn smartphones. Every time I watched someone's grandmother smile after learning to video call her grandson, I thought, this is patience. This is purpose. This is what it feels like to matter. Not because someone needs you, but because someone sees you. Back home, the cracks kept spreading. I didn't hear it from my parents, obviously. I heard it from Laura, always Laura. She sent me a DM. Your mom tried to get Theo to take over your stuff. He said no. She snapped. Apparently, she'd tried to guilt him. Said Mason handled all this without whining. And Theo, golden boy himself, snapped back. Yeah? Then maybe you shouldn't have treated him like garbage. I stared at that message longer than I expected. Not because it was satisfying, though it was, but because it proved even Theo had a limit. Then came the audit. Turns out, Dad's earlier mistake with the mortgage entry didn't just flag 1 year. It flagged 3. The IRS started asking questions. When they tried to log back in, they realized the new accountant had sent instructions to a folder that didn't exist anymore, the one I had deleted. Banking for Mom and Dad, do not delete. Well, I did delete it. They had no choice but to hire a CPA full-time. The fees piled up. They missed 2 utility bills. Their internet got suspended for a weekend. Laura said they tried blaming the provider. Then the power flickered. They tried blaming the city. But the truth sat heavy in every corner of their house. The invisible labor was gone, and they didn't know how to live without it. And still, my mom called me the Leech. Not to my face. Not in an email. But to Grandma, to her friends, to anyone who'd nod along. If the Leech were still here, we wouldn't be in this mess. That word. Again. The word that kicked me down the driveway months ago, now echoing back like some cursed boomerang. But this time, it didn't hurt. Because I knew who I was now. I had proof. A salary I earned. Friends who respected me. A lease with only my name on it. An apartment filled with light and peace, and no unpaid expectations. That evening, in my new place, I opened my old laptop, pulled up the last remaining backup folder from the drive, the one that had every tax file, bank screenshot, login hint, and spreadsheet I ever made for them. I stared at it for a long minute. Then I selected the folder, right-clicked, delete, confirmed, gone, not out of revenge. But because I no longer needed it, I was never the Leech. I was the architect. And I finally stopped building houses for people who only saw scaffolding when they looked at me. Toronto changed me. Not in some dramatic movie montage way, but in the quiet stuff. Like how I stopped flinching every time my phone buzzed. How I started waking up without dread. How I could buy groceries without calculating down to the last dollar. Peace didn't come all at once. It came in pieces. Morning light hitting my kitchen tile just right. A stranger at the bookstore recommending a graphic novel I ended up loving. Walking home with takeout. Earbuds in, no one demanding anything from me. It was the first time in years I wasn't bracing for impact. Then came the email from Trevor. He's Theo's best friend from college, practically family by proximity. Subject, thought you should see this. Inside, a screenshot of a private Facebook post from my mom. Caption, I just don't know what happened to Mason. Ever since he moved to Toronto, he's been so cold, distant, like we never even mattered to him. We only ever tried to help. I'm heartbroken. And the comments? People who hadn't spoken to me in years chiming in. Kids these days are so ungrateful. Maybe he's being manipulated. Didn't he get fired or something? I didn't respond. I didn't rage post or clap back. I just stared at the screen, Not angry, just disappointed. Again. Because what do you do when the people who taught you everything about guilt and silence start playing the victim to strangers? I'd finally drawn boundaries. Not walls, just lines. And instead of respecting them, they spun the narrative into a pity parade. But I didn't flinch. Not this time. A few days later, Theo called. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. Hey, I think we should talk. Things are getting messy back here. I know Mom's been saying stuff. Just wanted to say I get it now. A little late, I know, but yeah, call me if you want. I didn't want to. I let it sit. A week passed. Then another knock on my door. Not delivery, not neighbors. I looked through the peephole and blinked. It was Lara, my cousin. Sweater half zipped, hair in a messy bun, holding a cardboard box like she'd just walked out of a reality TV intervention. I opened the door slowly. Please tell me that isn't full of drama. She smirked. Depends on your definition. She walked in, sat on the edge of my futon, and opened the box. Inside, old photo albums, handwritten recipes, my high school yearbook. Found this in Grandma's basement. Apparently your mom was going to throw it all out when they did the spring clean. Said, hey, I won't want this stuff anyway. I stared at the Polaroid on top. Me, age 7, holding a spaghetti-covered fork like a sword. I figured you might want to decide that for yourself, she said. My chest tightened. Not with grief, with something like release. Like after all this time, someone finally thought, maybe he gets to choose what to keep. I offered her tea. We talked. She told me things I hadn't known. About how my mom had been rewriting history, painting me as ungrateful, unstable, vindictive. About how Grandma had quietly started correcting her. Mason helped you more than anyone. If you're hurting now, that's your own doing. Apparently, even Theo had stopped coming by. After the audit, the accountant, the late fees, the online bill errors, they tried to guilt him into stepping up. He refused. Said, I'm not your new Mason. The phrase echoed in my mind. Not your new Mason. Because for once, they had no replacement. And that's when the truth settled like dust on a windowsill. They hadn't just lost their tech helper. They lost their scapegoat. And when a family loses its scapegoat, things get real quiet, real fast. The next day, I got a letter, a real one, in the mail. No return address, but I knew the handwriting, my mother's. It wasn't long, just one paragraph. I wish things had turned out differently. I miss the way things were when you were still home. I am sorry if we made you feel unwanted. That was never our intention. No apology for what was said. Just regret that I'd left, that they no longer had access. It wasn't about love. It was about function. She missed the version of me that said yes without pause. The version that didn't ask for boundaries. That letter, I folded it back up, placed it in the box with the yearbook, kept it, but didn't respond. Because sometimes silence is the only language narcissists don't know how to weaponize. Weeks passed. My life kept moving. I got promoted. Started dating someone new. I hosted my first dinner party and didn't panic about coasters or expectations. One night, I sat on my balcony, a glass of wine in one hand, and looked out at the skyline. I thought about that old house. The one I used to tiptoe through. I wondered if the internet was still glitchy, if the trash was overflowing, if they'd finally figured out how to switch their mobile plan without me. But mostly, I didn't care. I was done performing gratitude for people who only valued my utility. I wasn't bitter, just free. And in that moment, I realized something else. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need an apology tour. I just needed this, a quiet night, a clear sky, and the absolute certainty that I would never let them make me small again. It happened quietly, the way endings usually do. No final fight, no shouting match, no dramatic doorstep confrontation. Just a ripple of silence that grew so wide, I couldn't even see where it started. Life in Toronto bloomed around me. I started a weekend coding workshop for small business owners. I adopted a scruffy orange cat that refused to respond to anything except the word chairman. I began sleeping through the night. Not because I was exhausted, but because I wasn't bracing anymore. I even bumped into someone from high school while grabbing coffee downtown. She didn't recognize me at first. Said I looked taller, happier, like I'd stopped carrying something invisible. She wasn't wrong. Back home, things crumbled in ways I never needed to witness firsthand. Lara kept me updated like a reluctant news anchor. Your dad forgot to pay the insurance premium. and their car got temporarily impounded. Your mom tried to switch phone plans and lost all her contact backups. Blamed the provider. Then Theo. Then cried in the store. They've officially stopped asking about you at Sunday dinners. But Grandma still sets a plate just in case. That one almost got me. Almost. But I'd built up muscle memory for letting go. You have to when you spend most of your life being useful instead of loved. One night, after a long day of debugging nightmare code for a chaotic startup launch, I sat down with a blanket, my laptop, and a quiet idea. Closure. Not the kind you beg for. The kind you write for yourself. I opened a blank doc. At the top, I typed to the version of me that they never saw. And I wrote about the birthday I spent fixing the Wi-Fi while they celebrated Theo's promotion. I wrote about the night I sat in the driveway with my backpack, wondering if I'd ever be more than a fallback plan. I wrote about every silent thing I did to hold that house together, the passwords, the updates, the late night support calls, the forgotten bills I paid before they became a problem. I didn't write to guilt them. I wrote to unburden myself, to pull the story from my spine and set it somewhere soft. I finished the letter, saved it, and didn't send it. I printed it, folded it, and tucked it into the back of that cardboard box Lara gave me. The one with my childhood photos, my yearbook, the letter my mom mailed with more regret than love. I added one last thing to the box, a sticky note. Just 2 words. I stayed, because I did, for longer than I should have. Through years of passive aggression and weaponized silence and invisible labor dressed up as family duty, I stayed, and they still called me a leech. But not anymore. That box now sits in the back of my closet. Not forgotten. Just finished. Some months later, I got a message from an unknown number. Just said, "We're selling the house." No name, no punctuation. Just 6 words and a subtext so loud I could hear it echoing through my phone. I didn't reply, but I pictured it. That house with the squeaky gate and chipped paint and drawer full of batteries I always restocked. Listed, staged, emptied. Strangers walking through it, commenting on the outdated kitchen and the tiny laundry space. Realtors opening closets I once hid in as a kid when I needed 5 minutes away from the noise. I wondered if they'd find traces of me in the wiring. My name on the old Wi-Fi label. A tech manual with my handwriting, forgotten, but permanent, like graffiti under fresh paint. A few weeks later, I passed a florist on the way home from work. Something in the window caught my eye. A potted plant with a small ceramic sign that read, "Grow where you're planted," or "Dig out and run." I laughed. Out loud, bought it, placed it on the windowsill next to Chairman's food bowl. It's still there, thriving. Like me, I don't check their socials. I don't ask about them. I don't send updates. I don't owe them that. What I do instead is this: I live. I show up for the people who show up for me. I build things I care about. I fix things for people who say thank you. And sometimes, late at night, when the city's asleep and the heater clicks on like a heartbeat, I say something soft to myself that I used to wish someone else would say first. You were never the burden, and I believe it now, because I've seen what happens when the so-called leech leaves. The whole damn structure falls apart, and the world doesn't end. It rebuilds, quieter, kinder, stronger, without them. The last thing I ever did for them, I removed their number from my emergency contacts, replaced it with Laura's. Then I turned off my phone. And for the first time in my entire life, I didn't wonder if they'd call. Story 2, Ethan is my name. My age is 34. Unmarried, no children, and until recently, I believed that by supporting my family, even if they were seldom, if ever, present for me, I was doing the right thing. I do a respectable job there. It's nothing spectacular, but it provides me with enough security and income to buy a modest 3-bedroom house on the outskirts of a peaceful suburb. It's hardly a mansion, but it does have a little guest room, a fig tree in the garden, and most importantly to me, peace. At least it did. After my dad was laid off, my parents moved in 5 years ago, and my mom's arthritis made it difficult for her to work long hours. It was only intended to last a few months. Until we get back on our feet, they said. I didn't hesitate. After all, they reared me. Providing a home for them to stay was the least I could do. But as the months stretched into years, their initial sense of appreciation gradually transformed into a sense of entitlement. Rent was never paid by them, never made a utility contribution. I paid for their prescription drugs, groceries, internet, and even streaming services. My mother would sign if I ever mentioned it, even if it was just lightly. As if I had asked her to use her bare hands to cut wood, she would add, "You know, we're struggling. Family is helpful. Family." My dad would just shift the conversation or nod softly. Little things began to catch my attention. In order to dry a single pair of socks, my mom would inadvertently remove my stuff from the dryer and put it crumpled on a chair. Most days, Dad dominated the living room, while I attempted to answer Zoom calls from my home office as he blared ancient war movies. My mother only grumbled when I once requested if they might reduce the noise while I worked. "If you're so sensitive, perhaps you ought to acquire an actual workplace." It hurt. Then there was Rachel, my sister. She is 31 years old, married, and resides in a 2-story home 20 minutes away. They are assisted by her husband's parents. Perhaps she comes once a month. Not to assist. No. To lecture, usually. "Ethan, you pamper them." As though she were the voice of reason, she would say this while tossing back her straight blonde hair. "This is not the way to enable them." I wanted to shout all the time, "Take them in yourself after that." However, I never did. I refrained from speaking. I always did. I believed that everything altered because of the disease. Nothing spectacular, like a hospital scenario. Just a subtle, sly weakness. I began to feel lightheaded and disoriented. Food didn't taste well. My joints hurt as if they were those of a much older guy. Walking up the stairs would exhaust me. My doctor indicated it appeared to be an autoimmune flare up after some blood tests. He had yet to determine which one it was. It might be lupus or another condition. But that meant I had to take it easy, eat properly, and be stress-free. This was obviously absurd. My mom was screaming at the microwave when I got home that evening, exhausted and dazed. She refilled it with metal. The scent of burnt plastic filled the kitchen. Platoon was playing on the TV, while my dad slept on the couch with half of a sandwich on his chest. I recall attempting to maintain my calm while standing there and wobbling a little. I asked if one of them could assist with groceries that week in a cool, even apologetic manner. Only this once. "We're not your maids, Ethan," my mother muttered, looking up from the charred mess and rolling her eyes. She spoke it out of boredom, not even anger, as if I asked her to wash my vehicle or fluff my cushions. As I waited for my dad to speak, I blinked. He didn't. Then, without even glancing up from her phone, Rachel, who was visiting for one of her hens, added her voice from the kitchen island. "Perhaps make a better budget. Ethan, I wish I could say that I finally let out all I had been holding inside for the past 5 years, that I yelled through something. However, I didn't. I simply agreed while standing there with my grocery list still in my hand. "All right," I responded. That was it. I simply didn't talk to any of them the remainder of the night. Despite going to bed early, I didn't get much sleep. Every time I picked up their medicines, my mind was racing. I had never gotten anything back for any birthday presents I had purchased. Food crusted in the sink, and I had to wash every dish after they went. I reflected on my early years and how my parents always had. We are making every effort to make up for missed recitals and forgotten birthdays. How? I was supposed to always understand Rachel, the golden child. I woke up earlier than anybody else the next morning. I brewed a cup of calm coffee and gazed out at the fig tree, which was swaying in the wind. I remembered what it was like to be at peace. It struck me that I hadn't experienced it in years. I then launched my laptop and began looking for locksmiths. One with same-day service was located. I made the reservation by midday. The man was at my door, quick and happy. I informed him I had misplaced a key. He handed me a receipt, 2 new keys, and replaced the locks without asking any questions. I gave him an additional tip. I then silently packed their belongings. With respect, each person has 2 luggage. I tagged some of the items I packed with their names. Everything was left tidy on the porch. They were at the supermarket. It must have been some hours before I expected them back, and my dad must have eventually gotten off the couch. I was using headphones at my workplace upstairs. The front door rattled, knocked, and then pounded. Then my mother's voice became loud and disbelieving. "What the earth is this, Ethan?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to. My phone broke. I choose to disregard it. After that, Rachel texted and then called. "Are you serious now?" she composed. "It's unhinged." I was upstairs, watching the mayhem unfold. Flustered and bewildered, my parents stood on the driveway. My mother was making a phone call. "It's probably Rachel." As if he couldn't believe it, my dad simply kept shaking his head. With her eyes shaded from the light, my mother looked up at the house and yelled, "This isn't funny, Ethan." I wasn't laughing, though. I simply sat there in silence as, for the first time in what seemed like an eternity, a peculiar serenity descended upon me. My phone buzzed once more at that point. Rachel left a voicemail. I put it on the speaker. I folded my hands in my lap. "Whatever it is you're doing, Ethan, you must stop. Mom is in tears. Dad is worn out. You're acting like God. You're exaggerating." "Let's discuss. Just open the door, please. Your family is this. You don't leave folks behind." My gaze was fixed on the phone, then looked down at the front door, which was locked. They resided under my roof for 4 or 5 years. No rent, no appreciation, no assistance. And now I'm asking for a sliver of support. It's me who is acting theatrical. I took up the phone and wrote one message. I have not yet sent it. I was still debating whether or not to, because I knew in my heart that this was not the end. At that moment, I noticed Rachel's vehicle arrive in the driveway behind my parents. The crunch of tires on gravel. Her door sprung wide as if she were about to make a big entrance. Her subsequent actions, however, made everything 10 times worse. She didn't approach the home at all. As if she had just left brunch, she stepped out of her car wearing heels and a fitting jacket, took one once at my parents, who were standing motionless next to their suitcases, and instantly escalated the situation. With her hands on her hips, she surveyed the porch and the bags before glancing up at my window with that distinctive Rachel smile, smug and annoyed as if she were the grown-up tidying up a teenager's mess. She yelled loud enough for everyone in the neighborhood to hear, "You changed the locks. Ethan, are you serious? Have you gone insane?" As if she had just been rescued from a disaster. My mother turned to face her. "He ejected us." As if we were strangers, she gasped. "After all of our actions." Rachel rushed to the front steps, snatched one of the luggage and jerked it in the direction of the door as though it would miraculously open with pure force. "This," she said, "is abuse. Evicting your parents without cause is not an option. This is against the law." At that point, I eventually stood up. Calmly, as if I had endless time, I made my way downstairs. I leaned on the door frame after partially opening it. "Hello, Rachel." "Abuse," I said. "That's a bit over the top." She squinted. "This isn't amusing." "I concur," I said. It was no longer humorous. "Mom came out 5 years ago, suddenly seeming frail. Her voice grew softer. Can't we just speak about this, Ethan, honey? You're not like this. The excellent one has always been you." I was surprised by how hard that section impacted me. The good one, not the one you adore, not the one that is appreciated, only the silent one who continues to give. I inhaled deeply. "You've spent the last 6 months living here for free. Everything was paid for by me. Bills, groceries, and even visits to the doctor. I never requested rent, never made a request. Actually." Mom gave a swift nod, grasping the opportunity, and expressed gratitude. "No, you're not. When I became ill last week, I stepped in." "We're not your maids," you answered, looking me in the eye as I asked for assistance with some food. Rachel then advised me to improve my budget. I became aware that I don't live with relatives at that point. My neighbors are entitled squatters. Rachel's mouth fell open. "Whoa, whoa, whoa. You believe you're a victim?" "No," I responded, meeting her gaze. "I believe I've finally had enough of being one." She shook her head and sneered. "What the heck? You wished to be alone yourself? You wish to spend your life alone in this house? Unhappy and miserable?" Being alone myself is preferable to being surrounded by people who are there just to take. My father had remained silent the entire time. As if the weight of it all had suddenly fallen on him, he took a seat on the low stone step at the porch's edge. I was hoping that he would say something human, but all he did was mutter and touch his temples. "If you weren't pleased, you ought to have expressed it." I almost burst out laughing, said something as though my tiredness, my beseeching looks, and my feeble attempts to establish boundaries hadn't been blaringly obvious. Rachel stepped forward, her voice changing from fury to cold composure. "I'll call the cops if you don't allow them back in. I'll mention that you abruptly fired 2 ill seniors." I had been waiting for it, so I grinned. "Go ahead," I said. However, you might want to include the food, the medical expenses, and the 5 years of free rent. Tell them that I recorded all of your bank statements, texts, and even the house camera footage of you laughing when Mom advised me to improve my budget while you're at it. Do you believe they will support you?" For a moment, her face twitched, just enough to let me know it wasn't what she had anticipated. She raised her voice once again and said, "You're being cruel." "Ethan, this is family." "No," I answered softly. "This is the result." Then there was a lengthy stillness, the sort that becomes a part of your skin rather than merely floating in midair. My mother was sobbing now, really wailing. She muttered, "Let's just go," and went for Rachel's arm. Perhaps he needs some time." Rachel seemed enraged. "It's not over yet." She gave a hiss. "This is something you'll regret." "Perhaps," I said, "but not today." Reluctantly, they grabbed their belongings. While mumbling, Rachel unlocked the trunk of her SUV. As if being marched into exile, my folks trudged over with their baggage. Nobody bid farewell. Nobody turned around. As I watched them drive away, I stood on the porch. The quiet was overwhelming. There were no war films on. The kitchen was devoid of banging pots. Only the slight buzz of my neighbor's lawnmower and the sound of birds. And in a long time, for the first time, it seemed like home to me. I was going to go back inside, though. Once more, my phone buzzed. Another voicemail, but this time it came from a surprising source. What she wrote in the message was from my mom's sister, my aunt. Everything altered as a result. I took a while to respond. I didn't talk to my aunt, Aunt Clara, very often. Her residence was 3 states distant, had a harsh tongue and a kind voice. Only 2 factors ever prompted them to call: vacations or medical appointments. Thus, a silent alarm went out in my thoughts the moment her name appeared on my computer. I stood on the porch and used the tip of my thumb to play the voicemail. I was almost anticipating a lecture, perhaps a guilt trip disguised as passive-aggressive worry. However, what I heard chilled me to my core. "I'm not sure what's going on over there, Ethan, but your mother just phoned me crying and said you tossed them out. I must tell you something, but I don't want to draw any conclusions too quickly. This is not the only thing, more than you realize. Please give me a call back. It's crucial." For a minute, I stayed motionless, observing the roadway where their automobile had vanished. My stomach grew constricted, more than I am aware of. Even so, what did that mean? After hesitating and putting my thumb over the call button, I went back inside, locked the door, and sank into the couch. More drama was the last thing I wanted to deal with. The way she said it, "not after everything. This is not the only thing." The tone was not that of a lecture. It had the sound of a warning. I then gave her a call back. The first ring caught her attention. "Ethan?" Her voice was quieter than normal as she requested, "Are you all right?" "Yes," I said slowly. "Better than I was the week before, really." She said, "I heard about that. Your mother told me you were ill, but she didn't mention that she threw you out like a slacker." I blinked. She then acknowledged what she had stated, not in a lot of words. Clara laughed dryly as she spoke. "However, I've known your mom for a while. I am aware of her storytelling skills. He is always the hero." A pause occurred. "Listen," she said. "Before I continue, I want you to comprehend, taking sides is not the point here. I adore your folks. However, you have a right to know the truth, particularly in light of what they just did." I took a seat in front. "All right." She let out a sigh, and her voice became softer as she spoke again, heavier. "Can you recall the date of your grandmother's death? What were you? 22. "Yes," I said. "Your mother and Rachel traveled out to settle the estate when I was in college." "Correct." Slowly, I said. "For almost 2 weeks, they were absent. They hardly spoke to me. They didn't simply go out there to grieve, though. A bit more than everyone anticipated was left by your grandma. She had been saving for years, it turned out, without letting anybody know, in silence. She made a substantial bequest. Enough, but not millions. It was intended to be divided in 3 parts. You, your mother, and your Aunt Lydia." My heart stopped beating. "Me, you, indeed. I was never informed that." "That's right." In startled silence, I sat there attempting to make sense of everything. "Your mother attempted to persuade Lydia and me, Ethan, that it would be better for you if they handled the finances until you were more secure. That's what she said. Consistent?" As if you were a feisty child who was unreliable when it came to playing video games and playing guitars. I gave a quick breath. All of a sudden, a million memories came flooding back. The strange remarks about my lack of responsibility and Rachel's constant mockery of my desire for direction. My credit was inexplicably poor when I attempted to purchase a second-hand automobile, despite the fact that I had already paid off my college loans. Are you implying that my inheritance was stolen? They took your share. Clara advised you to settle your parents' debt and Rachel's mortgage. Everything. Your dad retired early because of this. A few years ago, that's how they handled those trips. They said that points were used to pay for those. The room seemed to be tilting. Why didn't you speak up? Since it wasn't until lately that I learned the whole tale. After your mom started reciting her version of this week's drama, Lydia told me the truth. Furthermore, I must admit that I was worried about creating a divide. I reasoned that perhaps everything would balance out if they were looking after you. I gave a sour laugh. I wasn't being looked after by them. I had them under my care. Now Claire replied, I know that. I apologize as well. Yes, I am. Another extended gap ensued. She went on to say, look, I have copies of the will, and Lydia is willing to talk if you want to fight this legally. I don't know what you plan to do next. I took a while to respond. My thoughts were racing. The parts were fitting together quickly and precisely. My parents had not just exploited my kindness. I had been robbed, tell me a lie, caused me to feel like the burden, as they embezzled what was rightfully mine. They portrayed themselves in each chapter as the victims. Rachel, she was aware, of course. I need time to reflect. At last, I said. Take as much time as you need, Clara said softly. What about Ethan? Yes. You have my admiration for at last advocating for yourself, despite the 5-year wait. I hung up the phone and sat quietly. Not only shock, not only treachery. Decide. Because shutting the door was no longer the only thing to do. It was more than just establishing limits. Justice was at issue now, and I noticed a fresh email from Rachel when I opened my laptop once more, this time looking for a lawyer. All capitals for the subject line. You don't know what you did. She was correct. I didn't. I was going to find out, though. I was already ready for poison when I opened Rachel's email. I anticipated taunts and even threats of legal action. However, what I observed was distinct and far more illuminating. You are only self-centered, even though you believe you are a victim. You were always. You didn't need the money as much as your parents did. You were reared by them. They were worthy. You just sat back and pretended that they owed you something for allowing them to remain at that residence. Do you believe that changing your hair makes you a hero? It turns you into a petty little man. Newsflash. Additionally, you should stop lying to others about inheritance or anything else Aunt Clara fed you. Just keep in mind that there are other people who have stuff to lose besides ourselves. I was struck by that final phrase. There are other people who have something to lose besides ourselves. It went beyond just passive aggression. It was planned. A threat wrapped in virtuous outrage. At that point, I understood that the heredity was no longer the only factor. This was a complete and utter cover-up. They weren't only embarrassed by their actions, they were afraid of being found out. The problem was that I no longer felt afraid. I answered with 4 words, saved a backup to my external hard drive, then sent the email to myself. The next day, someone will contact you. I gave the attorney a call. Gregory Horn, a man in his mid-50s who was soft-spoken yet razor-sharp, was the man Clara had suggested. I brought copies of everything, and we met at his downtown office. My bank statements, which included years' worth of groceries and utility transactions, as well as my communication history with my parents, particularly the ones that suggested I was too unstable to handle my own finances, were mailed over by Clara. Gregory paused and raised an eyebrow at that last bit. Did they say it about you? Skimming the printout for years, he inquired. With thoughtfulness, he tapped the table. This is something we can work with. In addition to persuading Aunt Lydia to give me my half of the inheritance, it came out that my mother and Rachel had also falsified a letter for me, dated during my last year of college, claiming that I had freely refused any share of the estate. That letter had never been written by me. I tightened my jaw as Gregory presented it to me. The signature had enough like to mine to be mistaken for mine by an unobservant person. However, The phrasing was very professional and refined. In writing, I also never referred to my grandma as Miss Margaret. Grandma is what I always wrote. Would you like to file charges? Gregory whispered to me. Deception, counterfeiting, theft of resources. I never imagined having to respond to such question regarding my own family. I gave it some serious thinking. I thought back to my birthdays when they were in Florida and I was by myself. When they took my car without asking and left it with an empty tank, I missed a doctor's appointment. My mom laughed when I asked for assistance with groceries, and Rachel used to joke that I was everyone else's fallback option. How? In my own house, they made me feel like a burden. I made eye contact with Gregory. I do, I said. The following 2 months flew by. Gregory lodged a formal grievance. A notarized statement from Aunt Lydia attested to the fact that the money was intended to be divided 3 ways, and that she had given Ethan's share under false pretenses. Clara gave me the family group emails that demonstrated how my mother, Rachel, and I worked together to make financial decisions. I supplied years' worth of medical records, financial records, and even voicemails and text threats. Rachel went insane after receiving the notice of pending legal action. She began phoning me constantly. It started out as pleading, "Everything will be ruined by this. Please, Ethan, simply let it go." The anger followed. "Your own family is being destroyed by you. You would embarrass Grandma." Then there was quiet. However, what transpired during deposition was what ultimately sealed their doom. When asked about the letter I sent, my mother made a mistake because she was protective and agitated. On paper, she acknowledged that she had slightly changed the wording to make it seem more polite. That was it. It was the wall crack, but it was only 1 sentence. Gregory saw an opportunity and lunged in like a lion. To be clear, Ethan did not write the entire letter. She made an effort to turn around. He did say something along those lines, though. I simply said it clearly. "Understood," Gregory answered, grinning almost pityingly. From there, it was all I needed. Like dominoes, it was. According to Rachel's bank records, some payments were made straight from an estate-related account. There were no repayments, despite her attempts to pretend they were loans. Schedules, labeled cash transfers, and no notes. Once again, thank you. You're the greatest too. The court did not find it impressed. The verdict was rendered after 3 weeks. My share of the bequest, plus interest, had to be paid back by my sister and parents. The sum was close to $180,000. As part of the settlement, they also had to write an apology and pay a fee for fraud. The letter needed to be signed by hand and submitted to the court. However, the money didn't matter to me. Not at all. The truth was important to me. Word quickly got out. My extended family, who had always viewed Rachel as the one who succeeded, began to discreetly get in touch with me. I received comments like "good for you" from cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. Additionally, I always felt that their treatment of you was strange. How the hell did your mom manage to pay off their mortgage in cash? One person even phoned and said, "I remember your mom bragging about that." They all knew something, but nobody said out, because, as Clara had stated so clearly, nobody wants to sour relations within the family. But all of this taught me something. The gap may occasionally already exist. You're the only one with the courage to quit acting like it's not. In a way, it was poetic that my parents moved in with Rachel. From criticizing me about letting kids share her guest bathroom to dividing shopping expenditures, she changed her tone. Not so subtly, Clara informed me that Rachel was already complaining about how they eat like teenagers and scatter crumbs all over the place. I didn't answer. I was too preoccupied to appreciate the quiet. Once more, the home is silent. I've transformed the extra room into a reading area with sunlight, a comfortable chair, and no stress vibrating through the walls, and the fig tree is beginning to bloom. Sometimes I still get the pain of betrayal. There are times when I reflect on a childhood memory and question the extent of the partiality. But because I fought back, the pain isn't as bad as it was. I defended myself, and I prevailed. The life I should have had years ago, not simply the lawsuit. I received a card in the mail a few weeks ago. Just a white envelope with meticulous calligraphy and no return address. There was only one phrase within. "Mom, I hope you'll forgive us someday." I looked at it for a while. I then tucked it inside a drawer after folding it up. Because I did, not because I was able to forgive them. No need to cling to the pain any longer. It has caused enough harm enough. And now, I was free now. Story 3. Jordan is my name. I'm 28 years old, unmarried, and I suppose you could say that I've always been the family's odd man out. Because I never truly fit the mold. Not because I did anything wrong. My relatives anticipated. Unlike my cousin Rachel, I did not attend medical school. In contrast to my older brother Nathan, I did not join the family company. I didn't even remain in the city. I went off to establish a peaceful life for myself. I write for a living, travel occasionally, and generally keep to myself. I no longer had high expectations of them, not after being the last thing on everyone's mind for years. I'll be honest though, my name was printed in gold on cream-colored paper. When the invitation arrived in the mail, I felt a stirring inside. Nathan was throwing a party to commemorate his engagement to Ashley, his girlfriend, for a short while. I had the impression that I may actually be included, as if I was at last being noticed. Nathan hadn't been in contact with me recently. We occasionally exchanged brief texts, such as happy birthday or how's work. However, nothing profound. It had been more than a year since we had a meaningful talk. I thus recognized that it was a true invitation rather than merely a group text or a passing reference when I opened the envelope and saw the tasteful lettering. Perhaps, I thought, things were changing. Perhaps he was trying to connect. The engagement celebration was scheduled for a Saturday night at a posh winery around 30 minutes outside of the city. I didn't want to confess how much time I spent. Choose what to dress in. Something tasteful but understated. I wore pants, a white shirt, and a dark blue jacket. Tidy. Easy. The first even purchased a present. At the shop, it was wrapped. A kitchen registry item. One of the nice Dutch ovens they chose. I wanted it to be considerate, but it was pricey. I wanted to be present and helpful. The sun was sinking when I pulled into the gravel parking lot, bathing the vines in a warm golden hue. For a second, it was like a movie. I saw entering, watching Nathan's face light up, and perhaps him embracing me and exclaiming, "You came. We're so happy you're here," Ashley would remark with a smile. And I might, just might, sit at a table and once more feel like a member of a family. Instead, my aunt leaned in and gripped her glass as soon as I walked through the door. She spoke in a quiet, sweet voice. Only out of sympathy did he invite you. With a hint of Chardonnay in her breath, she muttered, "You know, they had to," Ashley added. It would be too evident otherwise. I went cold. The wrapped item was still in both of my hands. "What?" I thought I must have misheard, so I inquired. She cocked her head and looked at me as if I were a stray puppy that had wandered into the wrong yard. "You know how it is," she shrugged, as though everyone knew this. "Nothing is personal. We just didn't anticipate that you would do that." Hit me more forcefully than I anticipated. I glanced beyond her and into the main area, where there were round tables with clean linens, floral arrangements, and golden lights strung over them. They were all seated already. Glasses toasting, clinking, laughing. Each plate has its name cards neatly arranged in front of it. I gently glanced at each table as I passed by. There was no sign of my name. I took 2 walks around the perimeter. No card, no seat, nobody raised their heads. Nobody greeted me, not even Nathan. Holding the wrapped gift like a comfort blanket, I stood clumsily beside the bar for a minute. I must have appeared foolish. Or worse, as when someone shows up at a wedding to which they were not invited. I could feel this weird mixture of disappointment and humiliation surging up like a wave as my chest constricted. I had warned myself not to hope too much. I convinced myself that I was only being courteous and that it didn't matter. However, it was more significant than I wanted to acknowledge. Without saying anything, I turned around and left. I didn't even put down the present. Like a human, I brought it back to my car, put it in the passenger seat, and sat quietly. I refrained from crying. I refrained from screaming. I just sat there looking at the dirt path ahead through the glass. I then took a car home. About it, I didn't post. No one was texted by me. I simply became silent. At 8:12 a.m., the next morning my doorbell was rung. I still hadn't made coffee. With my hair in a tangle and wearing sweats, I opened the door. And there he was, my brother Nathan, in the suit from yesterday, without the tie. He appeared to have not slept. "You didn't need to create a fuss," he stated bluntly, as if I would set the room on fire. I blinked. "A scene. You rushed out. People took notice." I had one harsh, humorless chuckle. "Nathan, I was not given a seat. Nobody even greeted me. His body moved uneasily. You had the option to stay. Where did you find a chair? I'm not sure. Twisted. Was I not intended to be there? I inquired. Did you not prepare for me? He took a while to respond. Look, he said. Okay, Ashley took care of the seats. I advised her to keep it brief. I was invited out of sympathy since I didn't believe you would make a big deal out of it. Silently, I said. Aunt Linda stated as much. He rubbed his face and sighed. She talks too much. That was not what she was supposed to say. I took a step back from the door, feeling suddenly exhausted. Jordan, you ought to leave. Really, no. I won't apologize for embarrassing you if this is the appropriate time to do so. He appeared injured, as if he hadn't anticipated that, as if I somehow betrayed him rather than the other way around. We don't talk much because of this, he muttered. No, I said, sounding more icy than I meant to. You only remember, so we don't communicate. When you want to feel good about inviting your sibling so that no one can claim you didn't, I'm here to help. He didn't answer. He just looked at me for a while before turning and leaving, taking a few steps back to his car as he drove away. The engagement presents were still wrapped and unopened on the kitchen table when I turned to look at it. I was at a loss for what to do with it. Give it away, give it back, drop it off at his door. I remembered that moment. Not just Aunt Linda's whisper or the absence of a name card, but Nathan's shocked expression when I didn't comply. When I refused to accept my position as the sibling who was forgotten. Even without a seat, I was thankful to be close to the table. I wasn't finished yet, though, by no means. Because even though I didn't know them and wasn't a member of the family, I had something that they had all conveniently forgotten about, but would soon need. They were going to remember my name, let's say, if a card was present or not. I was totally silent for a few days. Didn't answer texts, didn't open social media, just disconnected. It wasn't out of spite. It was survival. I needed space to think, to feel, to let this thing fade so I could breathe again without tasting bitterness. But underneath the silence, I was thinking, remembering. See, what most of my family didn't know, because they never cared enough to ask, was that for the past 3 years, I've been helping out behind the scenes with something pretty important to all of them, my grandfather's trust. Before he passed, Grandpa Thomas made me one of the trustees on his estate. Silently. He didn't make a show of it, didn't announce it at a family dinner or send out a formal notice. He just pulled me aside one day, the last time I visited him, at his old house in Vermont, and said, "You've got a good head and a quiet heart, Jordan. I want you to help make sure the money doesn't ruin the family." At the time, I didn't understand what he meant. I thought he was just rambling about taxes and accounts. But then the paperwork came. The lawyers, the meetings. I learned the ropes, learned that the trust had very clear clauses, very specific stipulations, and most importantly, learned that a large portion of the funds weren't just handed out blindly. They were conditional. Things like education, support, mortgage subsidies, even business loans. Those required approval from the trustees, me, and a firm out of Boston, Nathan's entire business. In fact, his entrepreneur consulting agency that he liked to brag about it. Every family event had received a sizable loan from that trust 2 years ago. He didn't know I had anything to do with it. Grandpa had asked me not to say. I said it would be better that way. Now, however, I was starting to think that promise had run its course. A week after the party, I got an email from the firm. A new disbursement request had come in from Nathan, a sizable one. He wanted additional funds to expand operations, including leasing a second office space and hiring a part-time assistant. His request was wordy, filled with business jargon and vague projections. But the part that stuck out, he needed the funds fast. Within 2 weeks, or a deal he was chasing would fall through. Normally, I would have passed it along without question, approved it, let the money flow. But now I clicked reply and asked for a meeting. We met at a small cafe downtown, neutral ground. I chose the place on purpose. It was quiet, public, and not far from his office. Nathan arrived late, still wearing his tailored suit, but his energy was off. He looked tense, checking his watch, tapping the table. "Thanks for meeting," he said quickly, sitting across from me. "I assume this is about the request." I nodded, taking a sip of coffee. "It is." He leaned forward. "So can we move forward? I know the firm usually drags their feet, but this one's time sensitive." I studied him for a moment. "You didn't know I was a trustee, did you?" His eyebrows pulled together. What? I've been one of the trustees on Grandpa's estate since he departed. I've seen every request, every report, every loan. He went silent. His face grew pale, then flushed. Seriously? Seriously. He sighed noticeably, attempting to rebalance. All right, that's surprising, but great. Look, you've seen the figures. It's an excellent investment. I reclined in my seat. It may be, but here's the deal, Nathan. These money aren't guaranteed. They are founded on the principles that Grandpa delineated. Unity within the family, accountability, openness. Come on, he said to Jordan. A hint of irritation. Avoid taking things personally. It's business. However, you personalized it. At that gathering, I answered in a firm voice. Given how you behaved toward me, how your fiancé managed the seating chart or lack thereof, and the fact that you were unable to meet my gaze that evening, he parted his lips in self-defense. However, I interrupted him. Then you attempt to guilt me by coming to my house and accusing me of making a scene. No, I didn't cause any trouble. I left in silence. However, I could have lowered Nathan's tone and had him lean forward once more. What the heck? Is this retaliation? No, I responded coolly. This is responsibility. He appeared to want to reverse the situation, but we were in public, and he was more concerned with Nathan's reputation than anything else. So, compelled to grin, we sat back and said, look, I'll speak with Ashley. We'll make things right. If you want me to apologize, I will. I'm not interested in it, I said. I want to know that you will show a bit more respect to the folks who built this trust if you want it to back you up again. He tightened his jaw. Are you keeping the money as a prisoner until I behave well? That's what you may name it. I refer to it as preserving Grandpa's heritage. He nearly toppled his chair as he sprang to his feet. You're amazing. How about you? I said quietly. You should be more cautious about treating others as though they are unimportant. He rushed out. I lingered and drank my coffee. I filed a report outlining my concerns on the request to the firm later that week. Uncertain ROI, dubious costs, a lack of transparency, and previous financing reports. Although I didn't refuse it outright, I did suggest a delay, an audit, and a more thorough assessment, so the monies wouldn't be authorized anytime soon. It was another 2 days before I heard from Nathan. Then I received a call one evening. She claimed it was Mom Jordan. She spoke sharply. What are you doing? I blinked. Hello, Mother. Good to hear from both of you. Avoid playing games. Nathan informed me that the trust monies are being blocked. That money is necessary for him. I got up and went to the window, rapping on the glass while gazing out at the rain. You make a call now, she remarked. You've always been so sensitive, as though that clarified everything. At the party, you didn't even give them an opportunity. You simply departed. We were humiliated by you. I made you feel ashamed. By refusing to seat at a table that didn't exist for me, I repeated. You ought to have raised your voice. She lost her temper. Made it work. That's the role of family. I chuckled icily and resentfully. No, Mother, making room is what family does. Family members recognize when someone is being left out. Which family is this concerned about? You guys made my position quite apparent. On the line, there was stillness. So this is payback, she added. No, I said. I'm finally establishing boundaries with this. If it bothers you, you might want to consider why I ended the call before she could answer. However, I was aware that the call was only the first step. People who had never spoken to me were going to start popping up after the money stopped flowing, and not for the reasons they said they did. Less than 48 hours passed. My phone went from gathering dust to glimmering like it was New Year's Eve at the end of the week. Missed phone calls, voicemails, and initially courteous texts. Jordan, are you free to speak? Then progressed to guilt trips that were passive-aggressive. Nathan was the first, followed by Mom once again, then Aunt Linda. Even Cousin Rachel wanted to get coffee and catch up with me after not speaking to me for 3 years. Yes, all right. I didn't answer. Rather, I contacted the Boston business managing the trust to start a compliance check and sent them everything. I needed something official, a paper trail. Although I didn't want to cause Nathan any harm, he was going to follow the book if he was going to spend his grandfather's money. And I wasn't going to let nice language or bullying stop me from enforcing that. The trust was not a family savings account. Instead of enabling, it was designed to support. And my family had become precisely that, enabling. experts at the time, I began to hear rumors about my former community. Daniel, a buddy from my youth, who was still employed at the neighborhood credit union, sent me a note. Just so you know, I've heard that your brother's expansion has been postponed. He is citing problems with finance. Are you okay? I assured him I was all right. Actually, it was better than good since I wasn't playing the silent background part for the first time in years. The wheel was in my hands. The repercussions started a week later. Nathan arrived at my place once more, but I didn't open the door. Once, twice he knocked. I then stood behind the crowd a third time. Part quiet, part crossed arms. He said, "I know you're in there. Don't do this, Jordan, please. You're going to take everything over a party," he said after pausing. He still didn't grasp it, so I chuckled quietly at that. The celebration wasn't the only thing at stake. It was about birthday meals and years of subtly excluded behavior. I learned about the group family holidays through Instagram interactions, even though I wasn't invited. There were jokes made about me that no one gave any mind to. The celebration was just the start. It was the final straw. He stood there for another minute, and I observed him from the crowd. Then, at last, turned and left. No apologies, no voicemail, nothing but quiet. Then the true surprise arrived. I got a text from Ashley. The message was brief and courteous, but I nearly didn't recognize the number. "Hello, Jordan. I am aware of the stressful situation. Would you be amenable to us meeting alone?" For a long, I sat with it. Even though I knew nothing about her, I was intrigued by the tone. It was not phony. It was worn out. We got together in a peaceful tea cafe close to my house. When I got there, she was sitting down already, wearing a sweater and pants. The socialite atmosphere she typically exuded at family gatherings was gone. "Thank you for coming," she stated earnestly. Seated, I remained vigilant. "What topic did you wish to discuss?" She let out a sigh. "I'm not here to urge for your trust or to demand money. I wanted to apologize for blinking." That was not what was expected. She glanced at her mug. "The celebration wasn't handled well by me. I ought to have seen to it that you were seated. A good one. I invited you because you earned it, not simply because Nathan begged me to." I remained silent. I simply listened. I assumed you were unconcerned. She acknowledged that you were the type of person who disliked large gatherings. "Nathan used to tell me that you were okay with being left alone, but witnessing your departure in that manner. Perhaps we've all misinterpreted you," I thought. I cocked my head. "Did you not want me there then?" She seemed embarrassed. "No, initially, but not because to you. Because Nathan and you were strangers to me. He speaks of you as though you were this aloof, erratic wild card. He gave the impression that you would either make trouble or fail to show up. Now I see that was unjust." I let out a slow breath. "I didn't start a fight. I simply walked out." "I understand," she answered quietly. "It was more painful than if you had. I was surprised by it." She went on. "People began to ask inquiries when you left in silence. How come you didn't stay? Why wasn't a seat available? Why wasn't a picture of you and Nathan included?" Even some of our pals caught my parents' attention. It didn't look good. I crossed my arms. "I am now a PR issue." She gave a headshake. "No, you serve as a sobering reminder." For a while, we sat there in quiet. Then she said something that caught me off guard. "My goal is to put things right. Not to restore the trust. Not to correct Nathan, just to make this right." I kept silent, still being careful. "Processing is ongoing." She went on to say that you shouldn't be treated like a second-class relative, particularly when none of us recognized how many threads you were holding. Even though I didn't agree with anything that day, I thanked her for being honest and walked away with one thing on my mind. Perhaps I didn't need to be fixed after all. Nathan phoned again the next day. I responded this time. He said, "Hey," in a voice that was just exhausted, not irate or arrogant. "Hello?" A lengthy pause ensued. "Ashley then claimed to have spoken with you." "She did," he murmured. "I'm not very good at this. I am aware of my numerous mistakes." I didn't answer. "I've had a lot on my mind." He continued by talking about how we've all treated you, even myself. "I always thought you didn't want to be involved, and that you were good enough on your own. I thus didn't press, invite, or second-guess myself." I responded, "That's convenient. It's easier to assume that someone doesn't want to be included than to acknowledge that you've excluded them." He didn't say anything. On the other end, I heard him exhale. "You're correct." Then another pause. I am not requesting that you authorize the money. No more. All I want to do is speak clearly. Get lunch, perhaps. Me and you alone. There is no pressure. He wasn't coming to demand or defend for the first time, so I didn't respond immediately. He had just arrived. And that could have been the beginning. However, I wasn't going to fully drop my defenses. Not quite yet, because I was left standing on the fringe of his celebration as if I were invisible by this same brother. It was only after the money stopped that the same brother recognized how important I was. The true question now was whether he was interested in me or only in what I could provide. I had a move in mind for the following move. I didn't immediately accept lunch. I meant it when I promised Nathan that I would give it some thought. Because this is the problem. Words are simple. We made a couple mistakes and apologized. All of a sudden, everyone believes that everything is clear. However, I wasn't searching for cleanliness. I was searching for something genuine. It requires time. Real does something. So I waited. A few days went by. Next, a week. No frantic voicemails, no follow-up calls. It seemed strangely quiet. Perhaps Nathan has given up, I thought, regarded my silence as a rejection. Then I received a letter one morning. Nor a text, nor an email. A real letter, written by hand. 3 pages. Nathan sent it. I read it twice while enjoying my coffee at my kitchen table. It wasn't flawless. There were moments when it seemed like he was still defending himself, still attempting to explain the years of seclusion and silence. Beneath all of it, though, was something real. He talked to me about how he felt pressured to take up his father's responsibilities in the family company, and how his mother relied on him and embraced the notion that he was the trustworthy and decent son. How he had despised me for being able to leave all of it while he remained and followed the rules. He composed. It was simpler to tell myself you didn't care than to acknowledge that I did. I saw someone who was courageous enough to live according to their own terms when I looked at you, and rather than taking advice from you, I passed judgment on you. I didn't know how to be anything other than the insider, so I made you the outsider. That bit stayed with me. I understand if you never want to speak to me again, he said at the end of the letter. But even if it's slow and difficult, I'm here if there's a tiny part of you that wants to rebuild something. At the final 2 words, I gazed. I'm present. It was a beginning, but it wasn't a complete solution. I accepted lunch then, a little cafe we frequented as children is where we first met. He deliberately chose it. When I got there, I could tell he was already there, drinking black coffee and appearing anxious. It was a strange moment of complete circle. The scent of bacon and pancakes filled the air as we sat across from him in that vintage vinyl booth, and it seemed like no time had gone other than the time we spent talking. It has nothing to do with trust. It has nothing to do with the party, not even the letter. Not immediately. We discussed foolish topics. For example, the diner's jukebox was still there, which was strange. How Dad continued to refuse to get a new phone. How a video of Rachel's dog wearing sunglasses recently attempted to become popular on TikTok. We chuckled. It wasn't coerced. It was real. The discussion eventually veered into more complex territory. He inquired about my travels, writing, and my previous relationship, which ended a few months ago. I inquired about Ashley, his business, and if he was truly content or only crossing things off an unseen to-do list for his family. I don't know that more than anything, he said when he paused. He said he was making an effort. At the end, we spoke for 3 hours. We didn't give each other hugs. We didn't weep. We didn't make grandiose vows to communicate. Let's try this again, we said. I meant it too. However, it wasn't the end. Still, there was the trust issue. You see, Nathan's business idea still had fundamental problems despite his best efforts. Some dubious expenditure had been discovered by the examination I had requested. It was messy, unprofessional, and, to be honest, not the type of thing that Grandpa would have approved of, but nothing criminal. A few days later, I received a call from the business. What are you interested in doing? I knew I didn't want to block him when they asked. I had no desire for vengeance. Accountability was what I want. I then gave Nathan a call, informed him of the auditor's findings, and gave him 2 choices. The funding would be rejected until he revised the plan with complete openness and supporting documents. I anticipated that he would disagree and become defensive. Fair, he said instead. Before continuing, he said, "Will you help me fix it?" Part 1 hadn't anticipated that. We went over everything throughout the course of the following few weeks: gatherings, makes calls, dots, spreadsheets. I demonstrated to him how suggestions were assessed by the trust board, how to phrase things, and what not to say. At first it was awkward, but gradually things began to change. Once more, we were more than simply brothers. We worked together as teammates. Word spread. Mom naturally found out. She remained silent at first. However, she unexpectedly texted me one Sunday afternoon. "Tonight's dinner? No emoji, no explanation. Tonight is just dinner." After a solid 10 minutes of staring at it, I responded, "Why? Because I have to apologize to you," she said. I didn't go. Not that evening. However, as I mentioned before, real takes time, so I also didn't block her. After a while, Ashley and Nathan sent out fresh invites to their wedding. The same place, same couple, but a very different strategy. My name wasn't only mentioned this time. It was first printed on the inside envelope's family list. Tucked inside was a handwritten message from Ashley. "If you could come, we would be honored. Your name is on a seat there," literally. And I went, the wedding was stunning, elegant, and considerate. And Aunt Linda was the first to meet me when I got there. However, she appeared embarrassed this time. "Jordan," she murmured, smiling tightly. "I'm very happy you could attend." I returned the smile. "You didn't think I would turn up, did you?" She reddened her cheeks. "Of course we hoped so. This time, I'm seated." "Correct?" I inquired. I located my table and walked past her. The third table near the dance floor. On a heavy white card, my name was inscribed in a sophisticated style. Adjacent to it, it read on a little place card, "We appreciate you holding us responsible." When things come full circle, it's funny. How did it begin as an insult? It had become more than being welcomed out of sympathy. I was no longer the outsider or the neglected sibling. However, I also didn't need to be the focus of attention. All I had to do was be seen. And I was at last because I decided to stop apologizing for living in the shadows of people who never gave me light, to stop allowing guilt to control my boundaries, to speak up, to leave when I had to, and to return when I was ready, not because I caused a scene. Because sometimes the seat that no one saved for you ends up being the one that everyone remembers, and sometimes the quietest exits have the largest effect.